Welcome to the EQ4Life podcast. EQ4Life is a podcast based on your views as a parent, a companion, an entrepreneur, or business leader, and how learning to be smart about emotions plays out in everyday life. The purpose of the EQ4Life podcast is to casually educate listeners on being smart about emotions, or what science calls emotional intelligence. And here's our host, a practitioner and teacher of emotional intelligence, Parrish Owen Taylor.
Parrish Owen Taylor. It's an EQ4Life podcast. I got a very special guest here. And when I say special, I mean, we're going all the way back into the 80s. Boiler up. Got John Haime on the line. Yeah,
Parrish.
Right. Well,
don't say that, Parrish. That's too
loyalty,
far back.
my friend. Loyalty, right? Loyalty.
Yes.
But,
that's too far back.
Now you're calling in from, are you in Canada these days, John?
I am. I'm in Ottawa.
Excellent.
So
why don't you give the listeners a little update on John, and feel free to start back in the 80s and bring us up to
Parrish,
speed.
do you have 4 hours? Do you have 4 or 5 hours for this, or?
For you, we
No,
do.
yeah. Well, let's do the Reader's Digest version very quickly. I grew up in Ottawa in the golf business. My father was a golf professional, so I was sort of a country club rat. They called us in the day, and I built some proficiency at golf to the point where I got to a national level and was one of the top ranked junior and amateur golfers in the country in Canada. So that's kind of the start of things. That's the start of opportunities for me. I went to Purdue, like you did, which was a phenomenal experience. Yep, we got the phenomenal experience, great school, fantastic memories, and of course, a great education too. So that was the start of things. I turned professional out of college. I played for 6.5 years all around the globe, played against some of a lot of the top golfers on the planet. I played Canada, I played in the US, I played in Europe a bit, I played in Australia, Asia, South Africa, I played all over. Wow. An incredible experience for a young person too, because usually it's typically reversed, right? When people get older, they travel. I had the opportunity to do it when I was young and see things that influenced a lot of my thinking now. So that was great. Got injured in the 6th year had to sort of step back from professional golf, but still wasn't getting to where, even with the injury, I still wasn't quite getting to where I wanted to go. It was going to take more time. Transitioned into business, worked my way through business, eventually connected with some people who were very high level leadership people delivering leadership training. I became sort of a part of their group and started to do that and delivered team building, innovation, leadership programs in corporate. And that kind of leads me a little bit to what we're going to talk about today with the emotions, emotional intelligence. That was in 1995, I think, that, believe it or not, that I started. And it sort of, that piece emerged as a result of Dan Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, which was a very hot item. I picked up the book, I read it. I said, right, this makes a lot of sense to develop some programming around this, because I found that when I was working with the corporates, they needed this piece. This was a piece they really needed. So I built a program actually, or I built a company called Learning Links, where we integrated a bit of golf as sort of the fun thing with education. And we linked leadership with it. We linked innovation with it. We linked team building with it. But then we took the emotional intelligence piece and we linked it into the program. And actually the Hay Group, which was the innovator sort of the original model of emotional intelligence with Goleman, they hired me to deliver this particular program. I delivered it in Asia, I delivered it in the US, and I delivered it all over. So kind of getting back a little bit, I'm almost done with the Reader's Digest version. I started coaching executives in Asia too. I kind of worked my way up through the ranks and started coaching executives in Asia. And one of the executives asked me to help his daughter, who was a tennis player. So playing a professional sport, working with sports psychs, working with performance people, I started to build a model for athletes that I thought was going to be helpful for them and effective and get results.
What year was
Go
that?
ahead.
What year was that?
Oh my goodness. That was probably, early 2000s.
Yeah. Okay.
That was early 2000s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I built the model. I went back and forth with her for a couple of years and built the model, did my homework, got certified in a bunch of different areas around sports psych and performance psych and neuroscience and all these pieces that I needed to put the program together. Performance obviously is a major part of it. So we built that and she did well. So she sort of responded to the program. And then I came back to Canada and agents started to call me from the different sports leagues about the program and helping athletes. And so that's how I got started in sports too. So that was probably almost 20 years ago, I guess now. So we've been working kind of flipping on both sides. I work in corporate, so I coach executives, CEOs, in the C-suite, sales managers, whoever needs help basically in the organization. And then I also coach all sorts of types of athletes in the NBA, NFL, PGA Tour, ATP tennis, professional equestrian, FEI equestrian, professional squash, all these different leagues and sports. So that's how it all happened, Parrish. It was very serendipitous, sort of, as it all kind of flowed in step by step. I just sort of was doing a good job, doing the best I possibly could in what I was doing. And it sort of flowed in and flowed together. And I love doing it. I love doing what I do because you get to help people and you see the results. And it feels really good when a person, goes from where they are when they call you to where you're trying to take them, and you get them to that point, and it's very satisfying work. So I love it. That's it. That's the Reader's Digest. Not too bad, right? It wasn't 4 hours or anything.
No, you did good. And you left some stuff out because I do want to drill down, the corporate side of things, the athletic side of things. Now, again, full circle with John, though, you're family man, right? Couple of kids, couple of boys, right?
One boy.
Yes,
one boy, married to Trisha, and we have one boy, Aiden, who's an awesome kid. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So I love that part of it.
Let's drill down, John. I was kind of exposed to it in the early years too, right? Those early 90s. I needed it for myself, right? That was my introduction to EQ. You were already in a servanthood mode. You were already training and developing. Let's go back, to the 90s, John, when I guess the question is, what's changed? For me, it seems like this stuff was soft skills. It was soft. It really wasn't a part of, the training agenda back then. But today, we see a lot of skill deficiencies in emotional intelligence, especially not just in the leadership, but also down the infrastructure. So have you seen it change at all? Emotional intelligence and maybe the acceptance?
Well, I think yes, definitely the acceptance. I think it's become more popular. I think, emotional intelligence is not a new concept. It's called emotional intelligence, and they started calling it emotional intelligence in the 90s. And Goleman sort of commercialized it and popularized it with the books and then the alignment with the Hay Group. But, people have been teaching, bits and pieces of what you call emotional intelligence as far back probably as people have been teaching things. So, but yeah, the models, there's so many different models now too. And it has become very mainstream. It's become integrated in a lot of corporate learning, and a number of models have emerged. But, when you look at it too, a lot of the models that have emerged are sort of use the fundamentals of Goldman, which is kind of self-awareness at the bottom, and then relationship management and the advanced emotional competencies on top of the models. So yeah, no, I it's an interesting question, Parrish, but it certainly, and it's funny too. I find that in probably the last 5 years, it's really emerged again. It kind of settled down a little bit. So it was super popular kind of 1995, maybe to, 2000 and 10 or so, and then it settled down a little bit. And I really find that it's emerged again in organizations, and especially in leadership models. It's critical. If you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others. So that's really, so the emotional intelligence piece becomes a really important part of that.
Absolutely.
I think, just generally, there's just more of it, and it's more popular, and, it was commercialized in the 90s, but models have been built, and there's just more of them now.
Right. It's interesting you say that, because it always usually is associated with leadership. We see our academic institutions now starting to teach it and embrace it, definitely at the college level. I'm not sure about elementary, high school. I know Goldman's a big advocate for these skills, but that's what I like about it is, again, you get certain occupations that where we might have a safety critical task, safety critical meaning harm if you make the wrong decision. So we can look at occupations like law enforcement, our line mechanics. We do a lot of work in electric utility, and that's what we're seeing from your perspective there, John. And it's not so much leadership, even though we can say leadership out in the field, but where the work's getting done, and with all the distractions that we have today, there's an emotional intelligence piece. Self-checking is what they call it under human performance, but there's that piece about just being able to perform at a high level under pressure. And when you bring safety in, so that's what we're seeing with some of our clients, is we're starting now to go, it is a leadership piece, right? But more so, how can we break it down? Again, it's a skill, which, like you said, it's a behavior-based model. And a lot of times we see, behaviors that show skill deficiencies.
Yeah, you know what, Paris, too, in my business too, I'm in the performance business, so it's my job to move the needle on performance for my clients. So whether it's an entertainer or a corporate performer or an athletic performer, it's my job to move the needle. And definitely when you look at performance, emotions run the show. So I know you talk always about chatter and the self-talk and all those sorts of things. And that's a really critical piece today of what we're talking about too, and being able to really have a handle on that and have a process for regulating it. And because that chatter, those thoughts can really ignite emotions, and people have to be aware of that, right? So in my job, I just wrote this book for equestrians, and I talk about the fundamentals of performance. And certainly one of the fundamentals that is critical is that sort of leads to the whole emotional piece, is this idea of the voice and what it's telling you and how it's igniting your emotions, right? So, and emotions can be ignited in a number of different ways, from outside of you and also inside of you, from that chatter that I know that you talk about. So, it's a fascinating area, this area, and the idea of emotions. And, I'm a big advocate too of young people. So for people out there listening, for kids to get on this early, to understand how their emotions impact them, what their triggers are, and just understanding what an emotion is basically, and then going from there and being able to label them and to interpret them and to regulate them. So I really think this area is important. So it's a great topic today.
Well, and I guess that's where my admiration comes to you, because we're in the same profession, right? We're trying to help people get to that optimal level where they can sustain their best. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's like, now that we have science, I mean, we didn't have neurology, but now that we see that we call it a human factor. It's an emotional creature, this thing, we call it a human. So to your point, John, you work and wrestle to find a way to break through to somebody. The chatter is just another example that in order to regulate our emotions, you got to start in the head. You got to get in the head. And so whether you call it the voice or the chatter, that's where it begins. And even if you look at the competencies of self-monitoring, self-respect, a lot of the self skills, I think even there we see a lot of deficiencies today in leadership in corporate, but also in young athletes. John, let's focus in on the athlete section too, because you and I have both been there. I believe that it was somewhere at the turn of the century where I had convictions to start working into the athletic space. Again, young athlete coming up. It's been a difficult journey, but I want to get your thoughts on the athletic space and just coaches' receptiveness to it. Parents receptive. I know the athletes want it, but when I first saw you, again, saw that you were a Boilermaker, alma mater, but you had created an assessment. You would work to create at an athlete. I think it's called the emotional sports inventory. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And it measures an athlete in some emotional competencies related to performance in sports. So we've had a lot of success with that. I have a number of different assessments I use with athletes just to kind of get a benchmark on them. And that one's a good one because it gives us, ideas of where the self-awareness might be, or the confidence might be, or the focus might be, or the optimism might be. So that's important. It's always important for me to sort of profile the athlete and get as much information as I can so I can help them, right?
Absolutely. And again, I cannot say enough good things. Let me say it another way. I can say all good things about your assessment. In corporate, we use another assessment. It has 25 skills, but when we work with athletes, I had my 4 children. That tells you exactly how much I feel about it. But if we're working with an athlete to, like you said, get that benchmark, it's no matter an opinion. The second thing is that we're talking about things that you're not used to talking about with your coach or your parents, and that's what's going on in your head and how you feel. Those are 2 different conversations, right?
Yeah, you know what, too, Paris, the problem I think is, and there's a bit of a problem, and we're always wrestling with it a little bit, is an athlete, they work on the technical skills and you can see those. Everybody knows what they are. And then the physical skills, when they're in the gym and they're throwing the weights around and they're trying to get it to a level of fitness to really sort of be able to enable those in technical skills. And then you have strategic skills, understanding the game, where to be, what to do, the strategy. And then there's the mental and the emotional piece, which is often, sort of forgot about, primarily because you can't see it. Like you just can't see it. So a lot of athletes don't know what it is. And then the other thing is, too often they don't have a model to use to sort of develop the skills. And probably the biggest part of it, too, is that often athletes and parents and coaches sometimes believe that, if an athlete needs help in that area, there's something wrong with them, which is a major problem, and we need and we are getting it now, a major paradigm shift, because again, it gets back to skills. These are skills like anything else, like the technical skills and the physical skills, and you have to develop them, and ultimately they support the other skills. So you have to be good at those skills, and the better you get at something, the more sort of prevalent and important they become. So that's the big deal here. So, summarizing that again, I think, one of the major problems is athletes, they don't work on those areas because they think there's something wrong, but that's really far from the truth, because everybody now, a lot of the big time athletes, I work with some of the leading athletes in the professional sports, and they're all working on it. They know it's important. They want to understand it. So I think, we need to just shine a different light on it too, and frame it as skills and not as something that, there's something wrong with an athlete.
Absolutely.
So,
you're speaking on so many things there, John. One, the conditioning component, you have to condition these skills for them to be there for you under pressure.
yes.
Just like all the other things, strategic training, I call it drill stations. So what I hear you saying, I want to make it clear to the audience, is that, look, it doesn't matter the size of the ball, the stick, or the hole, whether you're an individual team player or you're in a unit. It's the competition that breeds the pressure. And again, you could study those times. It could be chest, for goodness sakes, right? You probably won't have any physical conditioning and training there, but it's that brain body sync that we see in our science and our friends, that, every athlete, regardless of the task, needs to learn how to get that brain body sync, and it's controlling those emotional states. So again, conditioning, skill, I mean, even the precept upon precept, again, once you learn to master, and that's a sticky word, the self competencies, then you can be, more confident, stronger in the we skills or the social skills with the unit. That's leadership. So, I mean, you speak so much. I mean, who would have known this topic called emotional intelligence can cover so much?
Yeah, it's a big area. And the other thing too, Parrish, lately is the neuroscience certainly is changing around emotions. Like you look at the work of people like Joseph Ledoux. Geez, her name has escaped me right now, but she's doing some amazing work in a lab in Boston, and highlighting, that we're more in control of our emotions than we actually know. And, in the past, we've talked about sort of the lizard brain and that sort of stuff. And they're sort of highlighting that those things don't really exist, in that we have a lot, we construct emotions like based on our experiences. And
Right.
And this is all new thinking. So this all plays into the emotional intelligence component too, the kind of the latest research in neuroscience. And it's fascinating, and you got to keep up with it. I mean, the neuroscience changes all the time. We learn more and more all the time about the brain. So it's been fun following that, and then integrating it into the models that we have to help people in a better way. So that's been fun.
You've been listening to the EQ for Life podcast. Please check back soon for our next podcast, EQ for Life. To learn more about the EQ for Life podcast or Parrish, please contact us online at info@parrishowentaylor.com or call 866-487-2815. That's 866-487-2815.